Max Verstappen has shared his honest feelings on Red Bull's current situation, as it seems like the Austrian team is far away from improving themselves in the foreseeable future, especially because they brought a significant upgrade to the Hungarian Grand Prix and it seemed to not work wonders for the RB20. Obviously, it's been the Verstappen factor who extracted the maximum out of the car ever since Miami. But now that this seems to be slipping out of his hands, could we see Verstappen leave Red Bull? And more importantly, how did his remarks disrespect the majority of the team members that made a couple of his good results in the previous races possible? The Hungarian Grand Prix just kept on giving, but it seems like the one with the biggest question mark revolves around Red Bull, as the Austrian team were left scratching their heads as to where the performance from last year has gone. The upgrades in Hungary were labelled as track-specific ones, but even with those, Verstappen managed to qualify for P3 and finish P5 due to his crash with Hamilton. And don't mind me saying, but he should be lucky that he finished the race after that heavy hit he had with the floor on the ground, with a similar lucky pattern following him in Austria too. Be that as it may, the RB20 is no longer the most dominant car, and if it's not for Verstappen, we could easily label it as a midfield car because of the fact that Mercedes of Hamilton was able to defend on older tyres for the majority of the race. And during that first stint, the 7-time world champion was constantly in the 1-second interval of Verstappen, meaning that the Dutchman didn't have the speed to fight with the McLarens ahead, but was focused more on defending. When talking about the entire situation in Red Bull right now, Verstappen himself said that he's not satisfied with how things are going, and he cannot accept the excuse of reaching the ceiling because their car has suddenly dropped off so massively from the first 5 races that it's hard to believe other teams have caught up so much. Elaborating on this matter in a greater extent, Verstappen said, "I am not happy. On a day where of course we're already lacking pace compared to the McLarens, you try and hope that we do the right things with the strategy, which today was not the case. The first undercut was not ideal, but you can get caught out, so it's okay. Then again, the team left me out in the second round of stops, where I basically immediately got into traffic with back markers. And on the day where the car is not the quickest, you need to try and capitalize on undercuts. You can't rely on a little pace advantage." The situation didn't really go well in Red Bull's favour, and it did seem like there were so many things that Verstappen and his team could have done in the right direction. But to blame the team for the strategy so fiercely on the radio is definitely not boding well for the 3-time world champion. We must not forget that it has been Hannah Schmitz, the mastermind that brought the P2 finish in Silverstone, as we've seen that during the first stint on the medium tyres, Verstappen got passed easily by both McLaren drivers and was cruising at P5. Nevertheless, the 3-time world champion has required the team to do better amid talks that he could be changing the scenery because of how everything's going right now in Red Bull, starting with the toxic environment and ending with the slump of performance that the RB20 is suffering from. Elaborating on this situation, Verstappen said, "Naturally, what we did in Hungary frustrates me a lot because I want things to be done better, because of course I'm realistic. We couldn't have beaten the McLarens, but a P3 was on the cards if we performed better. We know that we're lacking pace compared to McLarens, and it's not nice, but I don't think we can easily improve our overall package. We will see next week how it evolves, but at the moment, I think race pace, qualifying pace, we are behind McLaren." And it's definitely a realistic scenario, because when you see how well McLaren has performed ever since Miami, you would wonder why they've only won 2 races this season, each of their drivers jacking up a win in their careers. A win was on the cards for Piastri in Silverstone as well as for Norris in Austria, but then again, that doesn't take away the fact that the MCL38 is definitely the car to beat, as it doesn't have any lack or deficit in any sector that you would normally see. For example, Mercedes is struggling on tracks that have higher temperatures, while Ferrari is struggling to fix the issues with the bouncing and the high-speed corners due to the new spec floor they introduced in Spain. All of this goes to show that McLaren is in a league of their own, and the 1-2 finish in Hungary has only gone to prove that to a greater extent, as they managed to get past Ferrari and are now just 51 points behind Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship. On top of that, Lando Norris isn't that far away either in the Drivers' Championship, 76 points. So if he manages to keep the competitive edge and be constantly in the mix for wins, as well as a little bit of help from teams like Mercedes and Ferrari, McLaren would have something to hope for in the drivers' category as well. This is something that aggravated Verstappen to the point of him publicly calling out the team and talking about upgrades not working as they were expecting to, with the words, "Some people need to wake up." Elaborating on this matter in a greater extent, the three-time world champion went on to say, "Not everyone realizes the situation we're in, I think. With me, they know that I don't make excuses. I'm always very real. I think some people might need to wake up a little bit." To add fuel to the fire, even Helmut Marko has spoken about the upgrades and was surprised that they didn't work as they were intended to. And when talking about this to a greater extent, the veteran Austrian went on to say, "It was the first race with the upgrades, and Budapest is not exactly a typical racetrack. Let's wait and see what Spa looks like. Normally you gain more knowledge with every race, and I don't want to make a final judgment. Max must now show more patience and understanding, and the summer break is now urgently needed." To add fuel to the fire, Perez crashed in Q1, and that put him in an extremely difficult situation, as he was forced to start from the back of the grid. And while he drove an amazing race and finished P7, it was still not enough to cover for the loss of Red Bull, who managed to gather only 16 points from this weekend compared to McLaren's 43. This is a massive deficit, and we are to look at the graph as to which team scored the most points in the last 6 races. You'd understand that McLaren is the team to beat, and that narrative is very likely continue in the following period as well. Many were also quick to throw the blame to Verstappen, who was up late at night doing the hobby of his life, the 24-hour sim racing in Spa. But then again, he did the same in Imola and went on to win the race, which was quite easy to lose considering how close Norris came up at the end of the race. Nevertheless, the team went on to defend Verstappen and refused to put the blame on him, as both Horner and Marko said that they believe his judgment as to whether or not he feels ready for these types of hobbies to be part of his everyday life. Elaborating on this situation to a greater extent, Horner said, "Verstappen knows exactly what is required in a Grand Prix, and we must trust his judgment. I think people draw conclusions. Max knows what's required, he knows what it takes to drive a Grand Prix car, to win a Grand Prix, and to be a world champion. As a team, we always work as such, and whatever discussions of how to improve will always not take place in the media." The situation at Red Bull is definitely not ideal right now, because if we're to look at it, the Austrian squad has now lost the competitive edge to McLaren massively, and is at a significant risk of being overtaken by Mercedes in the next couple of races. The Silver Arrows are also going to bring upgrades of their own in the following period, and being the second team to have scored the most points in the previous 6 races, with this number hindered by the fact that Russell had to retire the car in the previous race in Silverstone, it could easily be a lot more and a lot closer to Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship. Wolff is now sitting in a car and rubbing his hands, plotting a plan as to how to convince Verstappen that the environment he is currently in is not the best one. But it could very well mean that the Austrian squad would help him in his scenario, as they are now misunderstanding the performance that they are receiving in the simulator and what's happening on track. This could easily derail Verstappen from his championship defense, and again he could be lucky that in 2 of the last 3 incidents he's participated in, he was able to finish the race at P5 and gather 20 points collectively, which could have been a very different scenario indeed. With all of this in mind, could Verstappen leave the nest of Red Bull now that they've done everything they can to keep him up by signing Marko until 2026? And if not, who would be the best candidate for him to sign with from 2025 onwards? Let us know in the comments below, and once you do that, make sure to click on the video that's appearing on your screen right now.